Okay, family, this is going to be a long one, but I can pretty much guarantee you that if you stick with me, listen, and ponder what I'm saying, it will be of benefit to you and yours. So, sit back and relax. This one serves as a bit of a continuation of the last podcast. So, as our teachers used to tell us in elementary school, put on your thinking caps. Here we go. Peace, family, and welcome to this extended edition of the Drapetomaniac Podcast. This is Ayapo Yapa, the HDIC, that is, the head Drapetomaniac in charge, and we're here to have conversations on how to get off this plantation. This podcast is about things that people do not take into consideration and the things that we should force ourselves to look at.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure that you listeners are listening to the Drapetomaniac podcast on doayamedia.com. You are, right?
In Stanley Kubrick's movie, A Clockwork Orange, the main character and anti-hero, Alex, who was a scumbag rapist and criminal, for his crimes was put into a program meant to rehabilitate him. His rehabilitation involved an experimental technique. His head was placed in a harness, and he was forced to view scenes of the most despicable crimes that man could perpetrate upon their fellow man. They also played music by Beethoven in the background, which they may or may not have known was the main character's favorite music. As a side note, in the context of the movie, I don't think his jailers knew that was his favorite music. It was just a kind of sweet irony. Because of Alex's degenerate and debased sociopathic nature, typically he would have thoroughly enjoyed the images along with the music that was put before him. But as part of his conditioning, he was given drugs that would make him feel violently physically ill as he watched the non-stop vicious acts. Now they had strapped him in a straitjacket, tied to a theater seat, his head in a harness that would not allow him to turn his head one way or the other, away from the screen. And devices were attached to his eyelids that made it so that he could not close his eyes or even blink. His eyes were kept moist by an assistant who sat beside him with an eyedropper, dropping artificial tears into them. Eventually, as he watched the non-stop violence and crime movie clips and static images and heard the music, the drug would take effect, and he would become violently ill as he watched. He begged and he pleaded for mercy from his jailers to release him and to let him look away and to go back to his cell because of how profoundly ill he was becoming. The end result was that in his mind, even after being given no drugs, any time he would see or even think about violence of any kind or any kind of criminal acts, or even hear music by Beethoven, he would become violently physically ill to the point where he literally could no longer function. So as long as he had clean thoughts and peaceful thoughts, he was all right. Beg as he might, they did not stop. And all he wanted was to be able to close his eyes and look away. The virtues, or lack thereof, of Alex, the humble narrator of the film notwithstanding, oh my brothers, is that my point is, though we are not strapped down and forced to look at what's really going on around us and the abject horror of it, we must at some point do so if we are ever to be free of the oppression that binds and crushes us. Our people deal with the same desire and that same reflex to look away as the character in the movie, but unlike young Alex, we do have the ability to close our eyes, turn our collective head, and look away. We want to look away. We want to bury our heads in the sand. We want to eat, drink, and be merry. We don't want to think about it. We don't know, and we don't want to know. We turn our heads by listening and talking about endless streams of celebrity gossip. We turn our heads by having heated discussions about who's sleeping with whom, who dissed whom, who's beefing with whom, and so on, without once asking ourselves the most important question. What does this really have to do, one way or the other, with me or my actual life? Oh, we can tear these celebrities down. We can drag them through social media. We can tell them off. We can cuss them out. We can get on social media and tell them that they're canceled. We can go on endless diatribes addressing them directly, but only in our own minds, because in truth, they don't and never will hear us and wouldn't care even if they did. But still we persist. And on some level, we feel pretty good and pretty satisfied to have gotten it off our chest. But what have we actually accomplished? Yes, we dragged their name for 15 minutes or a half an hour or 2 hours. But in the end, they are having the last laugh. When it comes to attention and relevance, as the saying goes, I don't care what the newspapers say about me as long as they spell my name right. In other words, there's no such thing as bad publicity. I hasten to add that there are cases when this is absolutely not true. People have lost entire careers by sending something as seemingly innocuous as a thoughtless tweet, and others have landed in jail. So I do understand that saying isn't a panacea, but I do say this. We actually become accomplices in what is known as the Streisand effect, named after Barbara Streisand, and I would argue it should be called the Rushdie effect, after Salman Rushdie, author of the book The Satanic Verses. Nevertheless, in both cases, it was something that so few people were aware of that it was almost nothing, but because it was either sought to be covered up or so vehemently stood against and talked about that it exploded into the public consciousness. And so it is for 99.999% of these quote-unquote celebrities we go in on. Were it not for us talking about them positively or negatively, little would be even known about them. That is the reason that some of them, and some social media personalities are guilty of this also, create fake beefs in order to create buzz and cause gossip-hungry ears and mouths to listen to and talk about them, for good or ill. It doesn't matter. It is the talk that makes them relevant. It is the worm on the hook, and we eagerly take the bait. Come on now. What does Oprah Winfrey or Jay-Z care about my 2-hour rant to the air as they're sitting and soaking in their hot tub, drinking a mimosa, and making more money in 5 hours while they're literally doing nothing than the majority of us making a year of hard work, including overtime? I'm not being hyperbolic. It is estimated that Oprah Winfrey makes over $11,000 per hour. I know we have many ways that we seek to escape the pain of this existence. I do the same as I watch movies and collect videos and such. However, there is a time to be entertained and a time to pay attention and force yourself to look into the face of the horrors that confront you. We submerge ourselves in trivialities and attacks on people. But at the end of the day, the people we're talking about and dealing with are basically in the same hole we are. Jay-Z makes about $507 per hour. And as I mentioned, Oprah Winfrey makes over $11,000 per hour. That's a lot of money, huh? Well, Bill Gates makes $7,000. Warren Buffett makes $15,000. Mark Zuckerberg, who owns Facebook, makes over $28,000. Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, makes roughly $149,000. I know some of you are saying Oprah Winfrey makes more money than Bill Gates. Sorry, I left something out on purpose. The figures I gave you for these white men are what they make per minute. Yes, Jay-Z makes $570 per hour. Oprah makes $11,000 per hour. Bill Gates makes $7,000 per minute. And he's the broke one in the group. At the high end, Jeff Bezos makes $28,000 per minute. He's making more money literally sitting on a toilet than many of us, including people who work at his company Amazon, are making in several years of soul-crushing hard work with overtime. I'm going to say that one more time, if not for you, but for myself to internalize this. Jeff Bezos makes more money literally sitting on the toilet than many of us, including people who work at Amazon, are making in several years of hard, soul-crushing work with overtime. Anyone who knows me knows I do not have any love for Oprah Winfrey, or Jay-Z for that matter. That notwithstanding, I gave you the numbers I did because I'm showing you that they are also in the hole with us. It's just a different level in the hole. But money cannot buy your way out of this hole. That is the trap they set, and many of our people have bought into it. We think that money, things, and material wealth is what will make us free, but that is not the case. They are willing tools of the system, and their fate is what it is. But their bowing down and selling out has never and will never get them freedom. No more than it bought freedom for those who betrayed Nat Turner, John Brown, Denmark Vesey, Dr. King, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, or any number of our people who were either assassinated or had our movement squashed in the past or in the present through things like COINTELPRO. Am I saying nothing should be said or attempted to be done about these toxic traitors who exist within our collective body like a cancer and are equally causing as much death and destruction? I think you know better than that. But that is a different discussion for a different day. My point right now is that to be black in America, and I'm not talking about skin color, I mean specifically a descendant of enslaved Africans in this country, it is to be in the hole, at whatever level, all the way at the bottom or nearly at the top. You are still in the hole. To be sure, immigrants and quote-unquote people of color must deal with certain indignities, but the full-on, unbridled, unrestrained, absolute fury of this country and the system upon which it is founded and it perpetuates is aimed squarely at the descendants of enslaved Africans in America, bar none. It is only separation from this system of white supremacy that will get us free. Look at it. Look into the face of horror. Don't turn your eyes away. We delude ourselves into believing we have some kind of power, while in truth, we are actually part of an easily dismissed and ever-shrinking minority with zero power or leverage, and to whom our voices sound to the powers that be like gnats flying around their heads, a minor annoyance that needs to be swatted away, if even that. Because to be sure, their solution is not to continue using their energy to swat at us, but to just spray insecticide and kill us off and no longer be bothered. We listen to politicians, people in positions of power, and those who set themselves up as leaders among us, whether they embrace that mantle or not, who tell us tirelessly that we must seek power and recognition within this system. They say we can do so with threats that we feel give us power and leverage, but to them to whom we are speaking or making these demands, they know we have absolutely no power or leverage at all within this construct. We march, protest, and demand prison reform, and at times politicians and people in positions of leadership vow that there will be some kind of prison reform, and that they will work for and toward the end of mass incarceration. Force yourself to look beneath the surface, and don't turn away. Rule number 1, always follow the money. Presently, prisons, both government-run and private, pull in over $182 billion with a B dollars per year. Who profits? Not only the corporations and the politicians that are purchased the same way that we buy a cheap t-shirt at a closeout store, but architectural firms that design the prisons, construction companies that build using those plans, the foremen and construction workers who are paid to do the physical labor, raw material companies that are used by the construction companies and they supply the materials, alarm and surveillance companies, power and water companies, companies that make uniforms for prisoners and prison staff, companies that make mattresses and bed frames, companies that make bedding, sheets, pillowcases, companies that produce the food they serve, companies that make the plates and eating utensils they use, companies that charge for email, it's called JPay, companies that charge for phone calls, companies that have private contracts with prisons like Amazon, companies that make toilets, companies that profit from the limitless slave labor by paying pennies on the dollar for work done by prisoners for their for-profit companies. McDonald's, Wendy's, Walmart, Starbucks, Sprint, who uses inmates in their call centers, Verizon, JCPenney and Kmart, American Airlines and Avis, using the prisoners to make reservations. Victoria's Secret. Well, the secret is out. No matter who's in office, does anyone in their right mind think these millionaires and billionaires and their bought and paid for lackeys in government are going to in any way slam on the brakes on this gravy train? They are raking in millions and in some cases billions of dollars. And we somehow think we can make them stop by carrying a sign and shouting empty threats through a blowhorn. At some point, we must stop looking at things from our narrow point of view and look with the wider lens and then dig deeper and deeper beneath the surface. We threaten to withhold votes or access to power, which would be a neat trick, blocking someone's access to power when the only power of the people making the threats is in their own mind. Or even ludicrously threatening to, quote-unquote, put them out of office, while not taking into consideration that for every one of us who will withhold our support if they don't give us what we demand, there are 15 white people and people of other races, and more important, big donors, and even a few of our own people who would be willing to withdraw their support if they do give us what we demand. Do the math. Give us nothing, lose one avenue of support. Give us something, lose 15 or more avenues of support, plus a pile of money. That is the reality of it. I gave the stats in my last podcast. The fake gender war? No, don't you dare close your eyes and look away. We become angry and disillusioned by a black man or black men or a black woman or black women who have hurt us individually or broken our hearts. They may have physically harmed us, spent our money, and then laughed at us as they were leaving us with nothing. We recoil from those among us who display violence, addiction, and a lack of self-restraint, and use those examples of our people who behave thus as a reason to, quote-unquote, expand our options, to leave Blackistan, or for black men to, quote-unquote, save ourselves. In doing so, we more often than not turn to they who as a people enslaved our ancestors and from that time to this continue to systematically and systemically oppress, murder, and terrorize us. We, because of a few bad relationships or experiences, or many, or just one, that we entered into freely of our own volition, by the way, or because of those within our number who behave in ways we should not, but do so because of cradle-to-grave negative conditioning, lack of opportunity, and living within an ecosystem that was created for the express purpose of terrorizing and genociding us. We seek to turn to those who historically have created and perpetuate a system meant for our destruction. What conversation can a black man have with a white woman, or a black woman with a white man, when coming home after dealing with aggressions, both outright, macro and micro, and framing it within the context of a world that was designed to subjugate them? What will their white, or quote-unquote other, spouse or significant other say? Oh, you're just being too sensitive. Just because the waiter or waitress went to everyone else's table before they finally got to you doesn't mean that it's because you're black. Oh, lighten up. I know there are some racist people out there, but just because the teller asks you for 3 forms of ID just to cash a $27 check doesn't mean that that's because you're black. They're just doing their job. Don't be so touchy. When I see someone coming toward my car, I always hit the power door locks. It doesn't matter what color the person is. I don't see color. I just see people. You're just hypersensitive. We know what we deal with day in and day out. And hearing some white person rationalize or poo-poo it can be infuriating and frustrating. But those who partake in interracial relationships willfully open themselves up to that very frustration. And frankly, who are you and what's the value of a relationship in which you're not completely free to be who you are as a full person who does not have to walk through a verbal or intellectual minefield at any time you want to discuss what it truly means and feels like to experience this country and this world as a black person? And make no mistake, the United States is a completely different experience for a black person who is a descendant of enslaved Africans as it is for a white person. It is as different as it is for 2 people who walk into the same 5-star restaurant and one is escorted to their seat at a candlelit table and handed a menu and a wine list as they listen to the soft string quartet playing lightly in the background. And the other goes to the back room, throwing on their soiled apron and hunching over the dirty dishes that they're scrubbing for several hours as their hands become waterlogged and aching, along with their backs and their legs as they stand listening to the sounds of clanking pots and pans and the head chef yelling and swearing at their underlings to get that dish prepared properly and out to the patron out front. Same building. Completely different experiences depending upon who you are within that building. Our people who get into these relationships rationalize it by convincing themselves that if the person that they're with were prejudiced or racist, they would not have married a black person, without once taking into consideration that there are millions of misogynists, that's men who hate women, who are in relationships with and married to women. And likely as many misandrists, that's women who hate men, who are in relationships with and married to, you guessed it, men. Being married to or in a relationship with someone does not mean that you don't have issues with the people of the partner of whom they represent. We flee the presence of those who look like us and into the arms of they who have historically and to this day oppress us, murder us in the streets, lynch us, deny us housing, keep us at the bottom by any means necessary, pay us less for more work, deny our humanity, become angry when we demand to be treated as human beings, and the list could go on and on. But somehow, some of us have arranged in our minds that these are the people to be desired over their own, based upon the fact that they have control of, or at least access to, the wealth in this country, without taking into consideration that it is all stolen goods and was and is accumulated by thievery, dishonesty, deceit, greed, murder. Theirs is a history written in blood. While some among us may be physically, mentally, or verbally abusive, or not honoring of their obligations, or commit the unforgivable sin of being unfaithful, of which I quickly add, no one can blame any woman or man who wants nothing to do with such people. But that is not all of our people. Relationships are like anything else. Finding good ones can take time effort and energy. And any ills we find in our own men and women also abound in other communities and ethnic groups, and most more so. But what they have and what we lack are the expensive cars, expensive clothes and outfits, big mansions and actual mansions, and money to cover up the stench of whatever wrongdoing we may do to our people. In terms of wrongdoing, we all have our dirt as various groups. The difference is we, black people, have no shield, no mask or covering to conceal what we do. We stand in the naked truth. They, white people, and some other groups, cover their bottomless wickedness with money. Staying with your own people is not tantamount to saying you should just settle for abuse or a lowlife as long as they're a member of our own people. No one is saying that. And anyone, and I mean anyone, who claims that those of us who are pro-black are trying to imply that is either misguided, misinformed, or an outright liar. No sane person is going to tell our men or our women to stay in abusive relationships or relationships with people who do not honor, respect, or value them just because they're black. We are saying, instead of running into the arms of a people who hate you openly, take the time to seek out worthy members of our community. We are all over the place. I have a beautiful black wife who is black mixed with black. She is one of the most fantastic people, male or female, that I've ever known. And she feels the same way about me, or so I gather, by the way that she treats me and interacts with me, and the things she says and does for me. But neither of us are so-called unicorns, nor are we exceptions to the rule. Yes, we are both exceptional people, if you'll allow me, but we are not exceptions. Our people are exceptional by nature. When you see one of us behaving in a way that is unseemly, we are actually acting against our own natures. That is one of the reasons it's so destructive to us. There are many, many, and many of us out here. Do you want proof? Okay, Mr. Black Woman Basher, you say there are no good black women out here, or very few. Are you a good black man? Is your audience, if you have a wide following, made up of good black men? I'm fairly sure you would say, yes, you are one of the exceptional black men, and that your audience is also comprised of good black men who are just fed up with all the sorry black women out here. Okay, fair enough. Okay, Ms. Black Man Basher, you say there are no good black men out here, or very few. Are you a good black woman? Is your audience, if you have a wide following, also made up of good black women? I'm fairly sure you would say, yes, you are one of the exceptional good black women, and that your audience is also comprised of good black women like yourself, who are just fed up with all the sorry black men out here. Let me let you both in on a little secret. Psst. Black Man Basher. All those so-called good black men over there are saying that you and none of your audience is any good. But wait a minute. Is it possible that they're wrong about you and your audience? Hey, psst. Black woman bashers. There's a bunch of so-called good black women over there, and they're saying that you and no one in your audience is any good. But wait a minute. Is it possible that they're wrong about you and your audience? Okay, if you know you're a good black man, but our women are saying that you aren't out there, wouldn't you consider them to be wrong in their assessment of you? If you know you're good black women, but our black men are saying that you aren't out there, wouldn't you consider them to be wrong in their assessment of you? Doesn't it stand to reason that the fact that you know that other groups hold these beliefs, but they're wrong about you, can't it also mean that you can be equally wrong about them as a group? Don't answer out of anger and emotion. Well, it seems to me that either everyone is wrong about themselves or everyone is wrong about each other. Maybe what we need to do, instead of dogging each other out, hurting and dismissing each other, we who are on opposite sides of the equation should take a breath, come together, and talk it out. I have a little mental tool that I use on the occasions when I'm upset with my wife. We're still human beings, so yet we get upset with each other sometimes. On the few times that occurs, mentally, I push out any negative feelings or feelings of anger, and I make myself remember and think about all the things I love, admire, and respect about her, which is a lot. And very quickly, even if I'm still a little irritated, I'm definitely more in love with her and feeling more love toward her than irritation. You would be amazed how that works. Because frankly, anger is a tool. We use it in order to hurt another person. The moment we lose the anger is the moment we no longer seek to do anything to that person. Just try it. Think about someone you have absolutely no ill feelings toward. As a matter of fact, a person you care for a lot. Now think of doing something terrible to them. You can't do it, can you? Or if you can, it makes you feel bad. Now think about someone you can't stand. You can probably do everything short of killing them. And for some of you, you might even be thinking that. And not only is it not bothering you, but it likely makes you feel pretty darn good. I wrote a paper years ago about anger as a weapon. At the bottom of most anger is a need for some form of revenge, whether justified or not. For this reason, people will hold on to anger, and I can prove it. Think of the person you dislike and remove all, and I mean all, desires to harm them or to see harm come to them or want anything bad to happen to them. As a matter of fact, wish upon them positivity and something good. Magically, if you're able to achieve that, which is no small feat, I'll admit, you'll notice your anger toward them also dissipates. That is because anger and revenge walk hand in hand. So, black men, black women, stop hating and bashing each other. Let go of the hurt and the pain and the disappointment caused by individuals. If you want to hold on to your anger toward that individual person who brought that hate into your life, then have at it, though I don't suggest it. There are always ways to drop the anger, but still have nothing to do with the person. But do not blame all of our people for the actions of a few. Black men, consider what you love about our black women. Black women, consider what you love about our black men. And realize that in terms of a demographic, a group of people, there is nothing to forgive all black men or black women for, because all black men and all black women, and all black people for that matter, have not hurt you. Don't turn your head. Don't look away. Consider these things with your eyes and your mind wide open. We are our rescue. Thank you for listening to this extended edition of the Drapetomaniac podcast. This is Ayapo Yapa, the HDIC, that is the head Drapetomaniac in charge, wishing you peace and blessings, sanity, safety, and security through separation. Until we meet again at the same time next week. Until then, I'll see you on the run.
And thank you again for listening to the Drapetomaniac podcast. Tune in next week at doiamedia.com. DOEAIAMEDIA.com. And again, we'll catch you on the run. Peace.